Good morning to all of you today, and thank you for inviting me to speak. I'm sorry I can't be with you physically, but I hope my contribution will be useful to this conference. Today, the main problem that has prevented any development of a real peace process and a real solution of the situation in Palestine is mainly related to the fact that there is a very severe imbalance in power between the Israelis and the Palestinians. This imbalance of power has made all negotiations that are taking place useless. 21 years of Oslo, 20 years of negotiations became nothing but a cover for Israeli expansion of settlements, for Israeli continuation of occupation, which has become the longest in modern history, and for the consolidation of a system of apartheid and discrimination against the Palestinian people. And during all these years, the Israeli establishment, the Israeli governing establishment, has done everything it could to destroy any possibility for a two-state solution. Some of the factors that contribute to the weakness of the Palestinian side in front of the Israeli side is the internal Palestinian division, for sure. But in addition to that, a major factor is the American unlimited and complete bias to the Israeli side and complete support to the Israeli side. The same applies to many Western countries that continues to provide Israel with military arsenal, with diplomatic support, without considering even the views of their own peoples in the continent. A third major factor that is contributing to the imbalance of power is the shift inside Israel itself towards racism, towards a system of apartheid. This shift of many Israeli citizens that are voting for racist parties is very much relevant to the fact that for all these years, the occupation of Palestinian territories was profitable to the Israeli citizens. It was an occupation without cost. More than that, an occupation that made profit to the Israeli economy and to the Israeli government. The strategy that the PLO has followed during the last 21 years has failed. Oslo process has failed drastically. What we witness today is an end of an era. Unfortunately, it took 21 years for many people to realize that this approach was wrong. But today, we see and witness a recognition and sometimes a shy admission of the fact that this past course has failed and that Oslo has led to disasters to the Palestinian people. What we witnessed recently in the most recent meeting of the Central Council of the PLO is a realization, or a beginning of a realization for some people, that Palestinians need a new alternative strategy to the one that has failed. A new strategy which we've been advocating for the last 13 years. A strategy which goal is to change the balance of power, which goal should be to make the occupation costly, which goal should be that the occupation would be more costly than the benefits it's making, through a combination of pillars. First, the popular nonviolent resistance, which is growing very fast all over the occupied Palestinian territories. Second, the strategy of boycott of Israeli products. So far, Israel has been exporting to the Palestinian territories no less than $5,700 million worth of products, while they import from Palestinian sides only $700 million. The third strategy, the third part of the strategy, is the BDS, the Boycott, Divestment, Sanctions campaign all over the world, which is growing dramatically and which has cost Israel, in addition to the resilience in Gaza, a very high price. And in 2014, the Israeli economy, for the first time in 10 years, stopped growing and actually shrinked by 0.5%. The fourth very important pillar of the strategy is in Palestinian internal unity. The fifth is to help people steadfast and survive on their own land. And finally, the sixth pillar is to consolidate and engage the Palestinians all over the world in the struggle for freedom and for justice. Many Palestinians have been alienated during the last 20 years because of Oslo, because of the behavior of the Palestinian Authority, and now there is a chance to recollect and regather all the Palestinian energies in the right direction. The most recent resolutions of the Central Council of the PLO, in which we have participated, took a very new, serious direction, if it is, of course, continued. It spoke about immediate stop of all forms of security coordination with the Israeli army. It spoke about holding Israeli authorities responsible for their duties as an occupying force of the Palestinian territories. It spoke about practically ending the function of the Palestinian Authority as a security sub-agent for Israel and for occupation. The Council adopted boycott of all Israeli products. It also adopted the boycott, divestment, sanctions movement and called on all free people and all solidarity movements all over the world to adopt BDS and to engage in it. And after 10 years of our application to the PLO, finally the Palestinian National Initiative was accepted as a full member. It was interesting that this acceptance, which was late by 10 years, came exactly with these kinds of resolutions that were taken by the Central Council. The success of the new strategy requires one other very important factor, which I didn't mention yet, which is the mobilization of the peace and democratic forces among Israelis and among Jewish communities all over the world. Those people who understand today very clearly that there is one of three possible options of today's situation. Either a fully sovereign and independent Palestinian state is established on all the occupied territories in 1967, including Jerusalem as its capital, and without any settlements, and without any settlement expansion. This would be one option. The second would be the consolidation of what we have today, which is a system of apartheid, land appropriation, and land annexation and discrimination against the Palestinian people in Israel and in the occupied territories. Or a third option, which of course would be the result of the second option eventually, but after lots of pain and suffering, and that would be one full democratic state for both people with equal rights and equal opportunities. In which case, Israel, of course, cannot claim that it is a Jewish state in any way. We believe that the realization that these are the only three possible options is very, very important to bring around a lot of democratic and progressive forces and people to support the right of the Palestinian people to be free from this terrible occupation and this terrible system of apartheid. We need a new alliance of people who believe in humanity, who believe in human rights, and who believe in justice. There are, of course, many tragedies all over the world, and many victims all over the world, especially in our region. But there is no people today in the world that has been so systematically oppressed during the last 67 years like the Palestinian people. The Palestinians have been subjected to confiscation and theft of their land. Many of them were forced to leave their country in one of the most terrible acts of ethnic cleansing. Many saw their land, or the rest of what remained of it, occupied again. And many have been subjected to a system of apartheid that is, by the opinion, according to the opinion of most experts, it is much worse than the apartheid system that prevailed in South Africa at one point of time. And the same Palestinian people have been subjected to denial of their basic human rights, basic civil rights for decades. Maybe this is why a person or a leader that is highly respected all over the world, like Nelson Mandela, said one day that the cause of Palestine, or the issue of Palestine, is the most important issue of humanity of our time today. What Jewish people have been subjected to during the last century and before, in the pogroms of Russia, or during the terrible Holocaust, during the Second World War, or even during the Inquisition time in Spain and in other places, is unacceptable. And of course, it created a lot of sympathy, a natural sympathy. But that suffering of the Jewish people does not justify in any way the same system of oppression that Palestinians are subjected to. It does not justify in any way the behavior of the Israeli governments against the Palestinian people, or the behavior of the Zionist movement in general against the Palestinian people. Palestinians have not been responsible for the suffering of Jewish people in Europe and in other places. But they were forced to pay a price for that suffering. And in a way, what we witnessed is what Edward Said described very clearly by saying, we've become the victims of the victims. This should not continue, and this should end. But the only way to end it is to adopt a new strategy of changing the balance of power. Changing the balance of power through what I've described as popular resistance, as boycott, divestment, sanctions, as by a strong solidarity movement among the people who support the right of Palestinians for freedom all over the world, and by also a strong engagement of true democratic, progressive Jewish voices, which should side by the right Palestinian struggle today, for the sake of the future of both people, for the sake of a future that can have peace and justice and happiness for everybody. I want to conclude by saying that there comes a time when people cannot take injustice anymore. And this time has come to Palestine. And I hope that you will support this struggle for freedom, for peace, and for justice. Thank you.